too. So the interesting things that I see, right, is that feeling of not being enough. So that can propel the motor of feeling like you need to do all of
Mm-hmm.
the things in order to be enough, which then causes the anxiety and the perfectionism. And then there's this other side of it, which is people like procrastinate because they feel like, it's the people who, for example, feel like they need to over plan everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they never actually get started because they spend all this time planning, wanting to get the perfect plan in order before they can start doing the thing,
Right.
right? And it causes them to feel bad about themselves because they've
Right.
never started the thing, but they're stuck in this like procrastination
And it
kind of
becomes
pattern
this
of
whole
life.
negative feedback loop, right?
Absolutely. Yes. So I find a lot of
Yeah.
people, which is so interesting because perfectionists sometimes are the people who do so much, but they can sometimes consider themselves lazy. That's a lot
Mhm.
of what I hear comes up is because
Yeah.
they don't start the thing. And so, like you said, it's that negative feedback loop,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Hello, welcome to Metamorphosis Moments, the interview series. This is Tricia, your host, and I'm an RTT therapist and a coach. And I'm here talking today with Ally Rose. Ally is in Pennsylvania, and she is a certified hypnotherapist, a master's level social work, and she is also a coach. So I welcome you to the show today, Ally, and I'm super glad to have you here so we can chat.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. So let's just dive in. Tell me more about what you do with clients.
Yeah, so I work with a variety of clients, but I have found that the thread that kind of ties a lot of my clients together is that they are perfectionists and they have high functioning anxiety. So
Mm,
work with them on getting to the root cause of that, which is often control, but sometimes it's not, I know
mhm.
that we can be surprised by what the root cause is.
Yeah,
So that they can really uproot that and start to plant the new seeds in their life of what they really want to experience in their life. So,
that's
yeah.
amazing. I find more and more anxiety is becoming more of a prevalent thing, and I'm not sure if it's more prevalent or if it's just we're more aware and more talking about it openly now. I'm not sure which, but
Yeah. I think it's probably both. I mean, I think that
mhm,
even in terms of, what people are willing to talk about in terms
mhm.
of their mental health, like people are very much out there talking about it. Whereas I don't think 10, 20 years ago we were as
Right.
open about it. And at the same time, I think that we are now living in a culture that is getting more and more fast paced, which I think increases people's anxiety because I don't actually think that our bodies have the capacity to hold everything that is
Yeah,
going on in our worlds. So
for
I think it's,
sure.
yeah.
There's just a lot, and I think that piece with social media in particular, where in a way we're more connected now than we ever were, but it's an artificial connection. And I think that also drives a little anxiety because you're always, everybody, of course, you post photos or things about everything that's so great in your life. Nobody talks about, well, the dog threw up on the carpet and I crashed my car. And, like you're not talking about the negatives. Of course, you're taking pictures of this beautiful gourmet meal that you had or you prepared and this fabulous vacation. And so
Yeah.
then other people are seeing that as if it's completely real and there's
Mhm.
nothing bad happening in this person's life. And then you start comparing yourself to other people and their successes, and then you perceive your own failures and compare compare yourself to others, right? And then that maybe drives this other expectation and perhaps increases anxiety as well.
Sure, because we're all being presented this perfectly curated version of someone's
Right.
life. And so then,
Exactly.
like you said, there's the comparison. And there's, I think, also what I find is like fear of rejection
Mm-hmm.
if you are not living up to that perfect standard. There's a lot of anxiety that comes, with that. So,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. You said that a lot better than I did. But that's exactly right. We're not all, you know, celebrities that have these perfectly curated presentation on their Instagram feed or whatever. I'm sure Kim Kardashian burns dinner, or, Beyonce or whoever celebrity that people watch. I'm sure they have crappy things that happen in their day-to-day life, but of course we don't see that.
Yeah.
And then you're comparing yourself to this perceived perfection in other people's lives, and that diminishes you in your own mind, I think. Plus,
Yeah.
there's no real connection in social media. It's all this kind of artificial facade.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it comes down to, so the interesting things that I see, right, is that feeling of not being enough. So that can propel the motor of feeling like you need to do all of
Mm-hmm.
the things in order to be enough, which then causes the anxiety and the perfectionism. And then there's this other side of it, which is people like procrastinate because they feel like, it's the people who, for example, feel like they need to over plan everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they never actually get started because they spend all this time planning, wanting to get the perfect plan in order before they can start doing the thing,
Right.
right? And it causes them to feel bad about themselves because they've
Right.
never started the thing, but they're stuck in this like procrastination
And it
kind of
becomes this whole
pattern.
negative feedback loop, right?
Absolutely. Yes. So I find a lot of
Yeah.
people, which is so interesting because perfectionists sometimes are the people who do so much, but they can sometimes consider themselves lazy. That's a lot
Mhm.
of what I hear comes up is because
Yeah.
they don't start the thing. And so, like you said, it's that negative feedback loop,
Mm-hmm.
right?
100%. And then I think you have trauma that gets involved in that, and ADHD, which is in many cases trauma.
Hmm.
I mean, have you seen that in your practice where?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like so I mean trauma, right? So if you experience trauma in your life, that's an experience of being out of control in your life. And so then wanting to have complete control over every aspect of your life, or
Mhm.
wanting to have complete control over the way that others view you, right? That's
Right.
often stems from a trauma response because that control gives you that safety and security. It protects you, right?
Mhm.
So it's definitely, I'm finding more and more that that is a huge link, is a lot of my clients have had some sort of trauma in their life. Um, and it doesn't have to be big T trauma, but that there can be these small kind of micro traumas that have
Mhm.
happened that cause them to feel like they need to be perfect because it controls and it keeps them safe. Yeah.
Right. And it's funny you said big T trauma, because that's how I always describe it. Is there's big T and little T, right? And a lot of the little T's that people don't even recognize as being trauma. I mean, it could be, a harsh mother that criticizes you for being lazy or messy or, loud, or whatever this perceived deficit is that you have. That, so the child internalizes that as, I'm not good enough, I'll never have my needs met, I'm an outsider, I'm a weirdo,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then that forms this limiting belief within the person, and they grow up and there's still this wounded child who always believed, because of what was said to them when they were small, that they're lazy or worthless, or they'll never amount to anything, or no man will ever want me, or whatever the crap is that you hear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that child internalizes that, and that creates this whole other, like kind of scenario in the mind. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're never good enough, you're never going to do this,
Mm-hmm.
then there's this procrastination wheel that starts churning of, well, if I can't do it well, then I may as well just not bother because I always screw it up, right?
Yeah, yeah. Or it's like chasing, it's like trying to run from that belief or that identity that someone else has given to them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the churning of the anxiety. That's the perpetual like forward motion. If I can just achieve enough, then I will prove my mom wrong, right? And
Yeah.
I will prove that I'm worthy. And it just propels people into this state of overworking, and trying to reach standards that they would never expect of anyone else in their lives.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I know. And I'm always telling clients, like, it's better to take imperfect action than to take no action.
Hmm.
And it's best to not wait until you have this perfect thing all lined up. Just jump in and just do things and stop. And nobody is expecting perfection from you except yourself.
Sure.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and so one of the things that I often do with my clients or tell them is like, okay, let's break it down to the smallest possible step. And because let's make it super easy for you to get started on the thing that you want to do. And it also is very regulating for someone's nervous system. Like sometimes taking that big leap, it dysregulates the nervous system a little bit too much. And then they're back, they kind of slingshot back. Whereas if
Right.
you just take that small step and then you take another small step,
Hmm.
your nervous system can regulate to, okay, we did this thing that was like a little bit scary, but not too scary. Now I feel grounded in this.
Yeah.
I can take the next step. And it's kind
Yeah.
of like turning up the knob on like the thermostat a little bit, right?
Hmm.
So,
Exactly. It's that old adage of how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
yeah.
So if you take one tiny bite and it went well, it wasn't too scary, then maybe
Yeah.
you can take another tiny bite and another. And eventually this feels so normalized to you. Now you can
Hmm.
start taking bigger bites, right?
Yeah. I
And
mean,
you build in this confidence. And by doing this, you're kind of soothing that inner child that really felt that they weren't capable.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we both know like the mind loves what is familiar, right? And
Mhm.
it kind of rejects what is unfamiliar, right?
And
And
if
so,
success is unfamiliar,
yeah. So by taking those small steps, you're making those things more familiar, to your mind. So,
yeah, for
um,
sure.
yeah, yeah, it's an interesting process for
It
sure.
is an interesting process.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that you're out there working with clients in this way. Now, do you separate your therapy practice from your rapid transformational therapy practice? Are they two separate?
Yeah, they're separate in that I make it very clear that for my traditional therapy clients, they have a different onboarding process. They kind of understand, when they're coming on. It's more of that traditional therapy route. I'm not actually taking when I became, certified and trained in RTT, I stopped taking on except for kind of by like referral only traditional therapy clients. Um, but there's the process is just so different, right? Whereas when someone comes to me for RTT, I make it very clear, like, this is what the process looks like. It's like a package deal kind of thing. Um,
Hmm.
and, my traditional therapy clients, for better, for worse, they get the benefit of, I tell them about RTT, and if they're interested in it, then we can do a full session. Um, it's different in that there's not the same kind of coaching that happens, but like I am meeting with them either weekly or bi-weekly anyway. So it's just a little bit of a different onboarding and offboarding
Hmm.
in terms of that. But I think being really clear with clients up front about what it is and what it is not, I think that's the biggest thing.
Right.
That's important to lay out. Like, what does this container look like for you? You know?
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of success comes from a client having the appropriate expectations.
Sure.
And none of it, whether it be talk therapy or RTT therapy or whatever it is you do with your clients, whatever modality, none of it's magic, right? So if
Hmm.
you don't have the buy-in from the client and they don't truly want this change, whatever it is, whatever that looks like to them,
Hmm.
then you're not going to achieve anything.
Sure.
They have to really want it, and it's not magic, so they have to work at it.
Sure. Absolutely. And I think the interesting thing has been is that let's say I've been working with someone for years on a particular topic and we've made in traditional talk therapy and we've made progress. Let's hope after years we've made progress, right? What
Hmm.
the cool thing is though is that we can do an RTT session and it can accelerate. It can be like the same amount of
Yeah.
progress that we made in the 2 to 3 years that we've been working together. We can see massive shifts and changes after we do an RTT session. It's like it catapults them
Yeah.
forward in what we
Yeah.
were working on. So
I
it's
keep
really
thinking of this image that another RTT person said to me, and I love it, so I keep saying it. It's like the RTT and the onboarding process to RTT is you jingling the keys and you're going down the hall and unlocking all the doors, right? So
mhm,
then whatever comes after, whether it be the full RTT session, coaching, or talk therapy, it now gives you full access to what's inside of those rooms.
Hmm.
So you've unlocked the doors and it accelerates that process and it enables the client to be able to access the thinking, the feeling, the belief,
Hmm.
memories, whatever it may be, right? So you're
Hmm.
unlocking all of that for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know about you, but I've worked with, in tandem with people who, they have another or an additional, like traditionally trained talk therapist that they've been with for years. And they want to try, RTT. They want to try hypnotherapy, right?
Mhm.
And so, I'm always happy, you set the boundaries and the expectations, I'm not, you go back and you're with your therapist and you do that work, but sometimes it can loosen things up. And I think that can
Yeah,
actually be a great kind of they can work in tandem. So,
I think so too. And I think recently somebody from the Marissa Pierce staff actually said that clients typically stop seeing their therapist. And I don't think that's necessarily true.
mhm,
I mean, I see a regular psychotherapist from not very often anymore, but I still see her. And I find that very highly beneficial to just talk things through with her and to have this sounding board essentially is how I use it. And
mhm.
also because she's seen me through all of my own trauma from day one, right? So she knows everything.
Yes.
And she's a tremendous tool for me. But I also gained a lot of benefit from continuing to do RTT, not just on myself, but with other therapists who do RTT. And I think, whatever the thing is you're working on is super beneficial and they can work really well together. I mean, I have, my therapist has said to me a few times, after I've been working on an issue, whether it be with her or otherwise. And then I'll come in after I've done an RTT session and she'll say, wow, you seem so much, calmer, more whatever you are today. And she actually encourages me always to utilize RTT if we're struggling with something.
Sure.
And it's so beneficial. And I feel like they do work really well together, or they can if your therapist is supportive of
Yes.
RTT.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, a lot of them are not.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think we had an exchange about that
Hmm.
actually in the our in the alumni group.
Maybe
Um
so, yeah.
because I am a traditionally trained therapist and I know you've had encounters with traditionally trained therapists that it has not gone well, and I've said,
Right.
that happens even within the field where there's this it's an interesting tension that happens within the field
It's
sometimes.
like
So,
there's this inbred kind of competitiveness
it
amongst
is. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
therapy realm where I don't know, they have to diss one another or something.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, what letters do you have behind your name? And then, there's a lot of judgment
Yeah.
that goes with
Like
that.
a
And
judgy and competitive. And I just feel like, you know what, there's so many people out there that have issues that need, you know, mental support or emotional support, whatever the thing is they need. There's a lot of room at the table for any modality that's out there in this helping profession. And we don't need to judge one another. If you
sure.
can actually help somebody, what does it matter what letters are after your name?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I have found my biggest breakthroughs. I have my own therapist and I've done obviously several RTT sessions. I found my biggest breakthroughs have come. My therapist is EMDR trained. And so EMDR and RTT together
It's a powerhouse.
have been where my biggest breakthroughs have come from. So
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
powerhouse right there,
yeah,
especially if you have trauma, whether it be big or little t.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I've actually have a friend who's a MSW and she does brain spotting, which
yeah.
is a similar, I think
Hmm.
they call it slow brain, what do they call it? Slow EMDR.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it's a similar kind of idea, but yeah, it's kind of cool the way it really unlocks some of those things. And then
yeah,
if you couple that in with RTT, you got accelerated results. That's been my experience there.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing because I think, both EMDR, brain spotting, and RTT, they all hit on things where just talking about it, you can't get to it in your mind,
Mhm.
in your brain, right?
Yeah,
And so
right.
combining any of those, powerhouses together, I think is going to unlock different things that
Mhm.
you just can't get to just by like accessing it through language, right?
Right. And that's why it accelerates with RTT, because you are accessing it through the subconscious rather than, it's like you're going in the back door, in a way. So, that conscious mind, you're not fully aware of your thinking and your beliefs and your limitations about whatever the issue is, the presenting problem. Because if you were, you could just go, oh yeah, well that's not really a thing, and I'm not going to do that anymore. So obviously that doesn't really work. You can't just say to yourself, stop that. It
Hmm.
doesn't work that way. But when you can couple that talk therapy with the subconscious work,
Hmm.
it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be
Yeah,
incredibly powerful. Yeah. Because even if we consciously say, stop that, there are parts of us that are way more powerful and way more influential in our lives that
that's
are
where
like,
bad habits are born, right?
like, yeah, right. I'm not stopping that because I'm protecting you in some way, right? Or I'm getting your
Mhm.
needs met in some way, or your perceived needs met in some way, right?
Yeah, your internal child's needs maybe, but yes.
Yeah.
you know, I think that's super helpful for somebody to understand that, whatever problem they have that they're coming to a therapist, whether it be, talk therapy or RTT or whatever, they're coming because it's a problem that they've struggled with. They're coming because they want to get rid of it. And
Hmm.
obviously they've tried before and not succeeded.
Sure.
So, to recognize there's this issue that you can't seem to get over,
Hmm.
clearly you need additional help. If you're so uncomfortable with whatever the thing is, that you're going to see some kind of therapist.
Sure.
If you could
Yeah.
just say to yourself, okay, knock it off, then obviously you would do that, right?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. And that's really the thing with, and I'm not knocking. I mean, I'm not knocking traditional talk therapy. I think it has its place. But I also feel like there's something to when someone is coming in and you can tell that they're very stuck in their story. They want to just tell the story over and over and over again. It just further ingrains that story. The more that you talk
Yes.
about it, the
Yes.
more that you own that, the more that you're like, this is my story, right? The harder it is to, get the distance from it, which is why I love RTT, is because it just kind of breaks through that, like, this is my story and like that ownership of it and kind of helps like crack that layer of it
Mhm.
away.
Well, don't
Um,
you think part of that is the language around it, the way you talk to yourself about it? Like, um, I'm very intentional about how I refer to my ex-husband who abused me.
mhm,
And I don't call him my ex narcissist or whatever.
yeah.
I don't claim him. He's not mine. I don't want him, right? So it's not my anxiety, my whatever, my abuser. Like, no, I don't own him. I don't want him, right? It's
Mhm,
not my depression, my binge eating, my nail
yeah.
biting, whatever the thing is. So don't own it.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
the anxiety, the asthma, the depression, the whatever.
Sure.
Depersonalize it, and in that language you're using, then you begin to separate it
Hmm.
rather than owning it. It's not
Yeah.
yours. You don't
Yes.
want it.
Yes. It's only yours if you want it, right? So
Right.
only claim what you actually want, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's really just, and of course, I don't know, for me, that comes through coaching with clients. Like we talk about how they talk to themselves and their expectations of their self, and their perceived failures or whatever it is they think, and they talk to themselves. It's like, talk to yourself like you're a 5-year-old child, and you'll be a whole lot kinder to yourself,
Yeah.
right? Would
Absolutely.
you say this to a child? No, obviously not.
Hmm.
um, let's talk to ourselves kinder. Let's not own things we want to get rid of. um, all of that comes into play.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so curious. I know you combine obviously RTT and coaching. So do you do it like, is there one RTT, one coaching, one RTT, one coaching?
Typically clients come into my program, and we do a very extended intake, um, which is really like a very elaborate coaching session to really understand all of the minutia
Mm.
of whatever's going on and who are the players in their life and what's the history and what was their childhood like, all of the stuff that helps you really form a full picture of what's gone wrong and when, right?
Mhm.
And then also from the RTT perspective, I'm using that as a way to farm all of that language that gets crafted into the transformations in the RTT. So how they talk about themselves, how they talk about their problem. So
Mhm.
I'm looking for all of that. Then we do an RTT,
Mhm.
and then I do weekly coaching with them as long as they need it.
Okay.
Um, in many cases, we have to repeat the pattern, RTT, and then a few weeks of coaching, RTT, a few weeks of coaching, just depending on what the person needs. Sometimes all they need is one RTT session and a couple of short follow ups.
Mhm.
Other times they need a lot more support. It just depends. Because I work with abuse victims primarily,
Mhm.
it's typically a number of sessions that we need to get through all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And the coaching is very supportive, um, for the whole goals. It helps formulate, bigger plans. I'm working with somebody right now that's really struggling to even take care of herself on a
Mhm.
day-to-day basis. And the intention is to help her formulate life plans, like what's next, what's the next tiny bite we're going to take out of that elephant.
Yeah.
And so that becomes this whole supportive ongoing process.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that you do as many coaching sessions as they need between RTT sessions.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's
really, I craft it to be whatever they need. you
mhm.
know if I could bang out the problem and make it go away in one afternoon, awesome.
Yeah.
But that's usually not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there are definitely things where, I think we've probably both experienced through our practice where there are certain things that, you've had those clients who they do one RTT session with you and like something shifts within them and, you know, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not always the case, right?
I
So,
mean, it's always the goal, right, to get that big breakthrough, but
mhm,
it usually takes more than one session. I've had a couple of times over the last several years working with RTG where I personally have had that big breakthrough moment right in that one session, right?
mhm,
But it usually happens more in that middle way where it's like you're beginning to cook up something in your mind, and you're not fully aware of it. And then maybe you're doing this mindless activity like watching TV or scrolling on your phone. And then this kind of like aha kind of comes to you.
yeah.
And I find that's usually the way change comes for my clients as well.
Mhm.
And then sometimes it changes that you don't even know about it. You didn't recognize it. And then some while later, it's like, oh, I don't do that anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just speaking on that particular thing. So obviously we all go through the process and we have our own RTT sessions. So I had done, I had a terrible fear of public speaking. Like something like this, us talking probably would have
Yeah.
made me feel, and knowing that people were going to watch it would have made me feel completely, I mean, I would have been red. It would have been
Yeah.
difficult. So I've done, 3 sessions on public speaking and being seen. And a lot of that stems from I grew up as one of two like Black people in an all white town. And so being fully seen was not safe in some regards because I was so different than everyone else. And so I hadn't thought that there was like a huge shift or change, but just like I would say over the past like 3 months, I'm like noticing like I've been doing more videos and like things suddenly that I normally would have felt like very anxious and
Mhm.
nervous about, like something like this or other opportunities that I've gotten. I'm like noticing, right? So I didn't notice the change right away. But now I'm looking back and I'm like, yeah, things that would have literally driven me into a panic, like things I probably wouldn't have even reached out to you, honestly.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm glad you
now
did.
now it just feels like, oh yeah, here I am
Yeah.
just doing this thing, right?
Do you
So
recognize when that shift happened if you reflect back?
I feel like in maybe like late December, January of this year, and I'm trying to think about that there have been a lot of RTT sessions, and like I said, I've done in tandem with EMDR and another RTT session. And I'm trying to remember even when that was, but that final one, it wasn't on like it wasn't on being seen or public speaking, it was on safety. Like I continually felt like I had this feeling of like just that I was carrying it literally like a backpack
Mhm.
of like not feeling safe. And I did a EMDR session. I did several EMDR sessions, and then I did a hypnotherapy session on it. And I think that finally shifted things around like the public speaking, being seen for me. So
That's fascinating. I
yeah.
mean, and it probably didn't even happen like immediately after the session because you weren't even aware of the changes happening. It was
No.
something in your mind was processing and releasing, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing is the big shift that happened right away was that feeling. I literally felt like I carried this feeling on my back. That
Hmm.
feeling went away
Yeah,
after I did the RTT session. It was like I could feel lighter. I could
yeah,
feel that was gone from me. So
yeah. I think that's amazing.
yeah. Yeah. But just getting back to that change, it's like sometimes you don't even recognize that the change has happened or that it's happened in the way that it has, or
Hmm.
kind of the far reaching effects that it
Right.
has in your life until you're doing the thing that used to cause you, panic or anxiety or some sort of resistance. And now you're
Hmm.
just doing the thing, right?
Maybe I need to do some of that work myself because I'm going to do a TED Talks in the next
Huh?
number of months.
Yeah.
And the very idea scares the living crap out of me.
Yeah. What are you going to be talking about?
Narcissistic abuse recovery. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're going to be amazing.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I'm working with some coaches on public speaking issues and, like just getting my crap together in that department. This is new to me. I've not done any public speaking and the idea of it scares me. But there have been a number of choices that I've made, decisions that I've made, big decisions in the last several years as I've moved through my own healing. And every single time I experience, or make this decision, whatever it may be, the first time it happened was when I decided to go to RTT school.
Hmm.
And the immediate physical and emotional feeling was like I start to shake and I would get really cold. And I'd think, is it cold in here? Why am I so cold all of a sudden?
Hmm.
Um, and I just feel this incredible sense of fear, the overwhelming fear. But then when I've moved through that fear and made that choice anyway,
Hmm.
even though it scared me to death, it turned out to be the very best thing for me to possibly do. And so
Sure.
now I'm taking notice when something scares me to that level, I
Hmm.
jump on it. I do it immediately because
Hmm.
I know it's what I need to do. And so when somebody told me they were recommended me for a TED Talk, and I was like, you're out of your freaking mind. And then I got that physical feeling. I'm like, I'm scared to death. I was shaking. It was cold. I'm like, where's my sweater? And I went, oh, okay, let's notice that.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's exactly what I'm doing. And I said, yes, where do I sign?
Hmm.
And then after it was like, oh, what have I done?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
when are you doing that?
I don't know. Soon,
Okay.
probably in the next 6 months or
Okay.
so.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to prepare for it. So like a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you should do an RTT session on it and
Yeah,
see.
I'm thinking I'm going to. I
Yeah.
might call you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, but I mean, I think it's amazing the the amount of things that this type of therapy, RTT, rapid transformational therapy, what it can be used for and how beneficial it can be.
absolutely. Yeah. I've had, we were talking before we popped on, like, yes, I tend to work with, perfectionists, high anxiety, procrastination, people pleasing. But I've also, I helped someone with infertility. That was amazingly rewarding. She got pregnant after our first session. Um,
Wow.
I worked with an entrepreneur who was really struggling with self-worth, and she had her first 20K month after one of our sessions. I worked with someone who was constipated for 18 years, and after 2 sessions had returned to normal, bowel movements. Someone who dropped like 25 pounds, and the biggest thing was like able to keep it off. right? Because
Mhm.
I think we all know the cycle of like, kind of going back and forth with that.
Right.
So it's just I feel like there with anything, like I feel like RTT can be used with anything. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there are caveats, and there are things that it should
Yeah.
not be used with, but it really is amazing in the way that it can help with so many different things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you find that most of your clients are similar? Like, are they?
Well, I mean, the bulk of my clients, they don't always come to me for narcissistic abuse per se.
Hmm.
They recognize they experienced some kind of trauma from childhood or from the past, but often they come for anxiety, depression, whatever kind of mood issues they're struggling with, or just feeling enough, having success, whatever, however it presents.
Yeah.
But then it often links back to something in some kind of traumatic childhood or adulthood type thing from a relationship.
Hmm.
So we work on a pretty wide gamut of things, right? But often if somebody comes to me and they're leaving a narcissist and they're struggling with trauma bond or whatever they've got going on, these women, and I work primarily with women, obviously like 70% of narcissistic abuse is perpetrated by men.
Hmm.
So most of the victims are female, and they all have the same types of issues. They're all anxious, they all have CPTSD, they all have codependency or people pleasing or however that presents. And so many of them have the same exact set of problems. It may just manifest differently.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's like the root is similar, but then the way that the it
Mm-hmm.
grows looks
The way
in
the
their.
vine grows is a little bit different with each one. Yeah. So there's nightmares, there's night terrors, there's panic attacks, there's whatever the stuff is that they've got going on, and
Hmm.
it'll all stem from a similar root. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's typically I'm not lovable. A lot of that comes from the abuser themselves. Like nobody could ever possibly love you but me, so just remember that you don't want to leave me because
Sure.
you're a piece of crap and I'm the only one that's ever going to love you. And so they believe that.
Yeah.
But it stems from something in childhood, usually someone else in their childhood, whether it be an abuser or a controlling parent, or it could even
Yeah.
be bullying or teacher or any number of things. Somebody from childhood's made them feel that they're not enough, they're not lovable, they're a weirdo or an outsider, they don't fit.
Yeah.
And this all kind of sets the thing in motion. And the only reason a person would tolerate somebody that treats them this way is because they have this background
Yeah. Hmm.
of being not good enough, not lovable, not whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
why would you put up with that? You wouldn't.
Sure. Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
yet, but yet they did. I
Yeah.
did. I
Sure.
certainly did.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting because if you ask them straight up, like, do you believe you're not enough? Oh, no, no. Do you love yourself? Oh, of course I do. You know,
Yeah.
they don't
Hmm.
even recognize how not true that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, when you've experienced something through your childhood that's so abnormal,
Hmm.
and then that carries you forward because your mind seeks what's familiar.
Yes.
Obviously, you see something in this relationship that seems familiar. Well,
Hmm.
it's familiar because you were treated some way from childhood.
Yeah.
It feels safe, it feels normal. And of course, no child knows that their childhood is anything other than normal, right?
Sure. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Somewhere in them, they might know because they go to the friend's house. It looks different, but it isn't often until they get distance from it that they can
Mm-hmm.
recognize, like, oh, I'm realizing that was not normal at all. Right.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, very interesting. Well, they're lucky to have you.
Oh,
And
thanks.
yeah, and can't wait to hear the TED Talk. I think when someone speaks from their own personal experience going through something, that's so
Mm-hmm.
impactful. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it'll be epic. So,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
excited. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Allie, I think this has been a fabulous conversation, and I'm so glad to have you on my little talk show today and to share all of about your practice. And
Yeah.
I wish you the best going forward. And
Yeah.
It was fabulous to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I had a ton of
You're
fun
so
just
welcome.
chatting all things RTT with you.
I know, right? We can just
Yeah,
talk and talk.
I know, right? We love it so much.
Right. Well, to our viewers, thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to know more about Ally or what she does, please watch to the end and we'll have some links to her website and her business. She is the Rooted Wellness Collective. And thanks for tuning in.